I believe we're live. We are indeed. Good evening, lovers and lovelies. How are we all doing? Seems a bit weird with me on my own doing a live. I haven't done one of these on my own for a while. It's normally Jay and I together. And as Jay has attested to on many a occasion, I'm more of the doer in our relationship. So it's a bit weird. It's a bit strange doing a live on my own without her. Oh, she's here. Hello, darling. Hello. You might be the only one here, given that it is Valentine's night. But anyway, yeah. Good evening, everybody. Hello. Yes, it's Valentine's night. And how are you all doing? How's your Valentine's Day been? Have you been serenaded by candlelight? Or whooshed off your feet at all? Or maybe you've received some chocolates and flowers today. Yeah, I've got my nice little red candle up there going. It's got a lovely scent to it, you probably remember. Yeah, and I've got my little glittery lights going off down here as well, my little Christmas lights. So I'm all nice and cozy. The only thing that I'm missing, oh actually I'm not missing it at all. I've got it right here, and that is a blankie, although it's not the purple one. I would have liked it to have been the purple blankie, but I do have a blankie here as well to keep me company if I get chilly. So just a quick reminder, in case you're watching this on a replay, that we've made a slight change to our billing schedule. So Synergy and Flow has returned back with a vengeance. I'm always missing you, darling. Always missing you. Mwah, mwah. You don't have to ask. So our billing schedule has changed. So Synergy and Flow has returned. And if you've been watching our replays recently, if you've watched our lives, you'll know that we've now changed our schedule so that we're together, Jay and I are together every other Sunday, given a live. And that's really an open discussion, open forum event. More like a check-in. We're sort of billing it as a check-in, and it's an opportunity for you to come and share your thoughts with us, share your ideas, come and have a general chit chat with us, all things related to energy and law of attraction, spirituality, all those lovely subjects that we like to talk about. Crystals, of course, if Jay was here, of course you'll be endorsing crystals for sure. So that's every other Sunday, and we're back together this Sunday with another Synergy and Flow check-in. And every Tuesday now, every Tuesday evening, at around about this time, about 7:30, Jay and I are taking it in turns to talk about a particular theme or a subject, or just taking a topic really. It could be a subject that's relevant to the time. It could be related to energy, spirituality, a life pursuit, the life journey of pursuing enlightenment, whatever it might be. And we just really talk for a little bit about our experience. We share our ideas, our thoughts about that subject, and we encourage you to participate as well in the discussion. These things always work better when there's a bit of a discussion going on and we can interact with that conversation that's happening live in the moment. And obviously if you're watching this on a replay, then feel free to still comment and like our posts, because we still get to see that. We still see the interaction, the engagement happening, even if it's after the event. And it's quite interesting to see those conversations panning out even long after the live has happened. you know. So feel free, even on a replay, to pop your comments in the comment box and share your own ideas, share your thoughts. And obviously, if you're here on the live with us, then it would be great to hear from you live in the moment and have a conversation with you, so to speak. So last week, Jay graced us with her beauty on Tuesday evening, and rather unselfishly opened up. I was admired and really impressed with how she opened up about her childhood and her experiences of energy and coming across Reiki and crystals and things like that. Growing up in Northern Ireland, obviously, as well. So this week it's my turn. It's my turn. You get to hear my dulcet tones and my dashing good looks beaming through your screens this evening. And really the subject tonight, you know, I was a little bit uncertain as to what the subject would be that I would talk about. And I had a couple of ideas, and they may be subjects that I'll come back to at another point, at another time. But actually it was Jay that reminded me that, how could I forget, of the significance of today, of it being Valentine's Day. And we had a little discussion around it, and we agreed that actually the subject of love is probably very relevant for people right now, for lots of reasons, not just because it's Valentine's Day. There's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of things, a lot of hostility, there's a lot of uncertainty as well. There's a lot of things that really are quite confusing and baffling. All this talk of UFOs and things like that. It's a bit uncertain, and for some it could be quite unnerving as well, and quite disconcerting of where we're heading and what the agenda is at this point. Now, I don't want to go down the political route, and my theme this evening isn't really to kind of look at that at all, but it's to paint the picture and to look at the scene. I mean, we live in testing times at this moment, and so things like love, affection, decency, respect, tolerance, those are things that can be easily cast aside. They can be things that can turn into throwaway statements or throwaway ideas, throwaway opinions. And what I mean by that is that it's very easy to become self-absorbed or absorbed, finding the self to become absorbed in everything that's happening around the world, and to be stressed by that, to be vexed by that in some way. And what we know through our own practice of energy work, meditating, etc., is that when the body is stressed, when we are stressed, then our behaviors, our actions, the quality of our existence dramatically changes and transforms. And what we experience in life is a very, very different experience than if it was one where we were fully embodying love and romance and decency, respect, compassion, etc. Our experience of life, our experience of the world, and not just the world around us, but the wider world, well, that perspective changes. And you may have heard Jay and I talk about perspective on several occasions through our lives, that it only takes a subtle shift in perspective to make a big difference. When you think of a boat at sea, if it changes its course by 1 degree, by 1 small degree, the outcome and the destination is very, very different. And so is the same with our perspective and our view of the world. But the theme this evening is about love. So really, it's not just about the perspective of the outer world. And really, it's about the perspective of us. It's the inside. It's the self. And so whilst Valentine's Day is a mark of celebrating the love, the romance that we have and that we feel for others, actually it's just as important that we show that love, that intimacy for the self. And let's not forget that there are individuals right now that are without, shall we say, without love, but not really without love. What I mean is that would consider themselves single, not in the capacity to be with a loved one, whether that be through passing or separation or whatever that may be. So there are individuals that are out there that are unable to celebrate Valentine's Day. And we must be respectful and mindful of that. Now, I hope Jay doesn't mind me disclosing this, but it might not come as a shock or surprise to you that we don't necessarily celebrate Valentine's Day, celebrate in loose terms. We embrace it and we show and declare love for each other. But really, the significance of displaying love is a constant. It's not a one-time affair. It's not a one-time thing. Love is not something that starts and ends. And if you're on a journey yourself of self-improvement, self-development, let's take the spiritual aspect out of that for the moment. But if you are on a journey of self-development, self-improvement, whether that be through yoga, through Pilates, meditation, particularly meditation, then what you may know, what you may understand is that the substance, the quality that binds and unifies everything is love. It's an infinite thing. It's not bound by anything. It's not limited. And yes, we talk about energy, and energy is the substance that has made and created the universe. It's what you and I are made of. It's what everything is made of. The universe is made of matter, and if something is made of matter, then it's made of energy. But what powers and drives that unification is love. It's compassion for the self. And to go, well, let's try not to go too deep on the subject, but we'll go a little deeper. We'll test the waters, so to speak. One of the forms of meditation that Jay and I practice, again, this is no secret at all, is transcendental meditation. And what we learned through our tutor, big shout out to Pat and Rick of the Guildford branch of the Transcendental Movement, is that when we meditate, what we are doing in the process of meditating is realizing the self. We're realizing the self. The self is becoming, if you like, re-realized in a way. Reborn, that's a we've got to be careful about using that terminology. But in a way, we're reconnecting with the self. We're reconnecting with the self. And when we meditate, several things are happening and taking place. The first of which is that we are re-educating the central nervous system. So this is the physiological benefit of meditating. The central nervous system is becoming reconditioned. It's becoming tuned, refined to deal with subtler states of consciousness, what is widely known and accepted as higher states of consciousness or deeper levels of consciousness. It's one of the same thing, however you perceive it, it's the same thing. And when we delve into those depths of consciousness, what we're reconnecting with is the self. What is being realized is the self. And in doing so, it changes your view, it changes your perspective of things. Your perspective of reality also becomes more refined. It also becomes clearer. This realization that this reality is not the reality that we live in, that there's another form of reality, a better, more fluid reality, where everything is connected and you can see that connection, experience that connection. And this is why love itself is so important, because in realizing that you are connected with the self and that everything is the self, that although you are watching this as an individual, you are also the self. I, sitting here delivering this as an individual, is a part of that self. And so now love becomes more pertinent. Love becomes more defined. And so the way that we perceive self-love and the way that we see self-love is transferable. It's different. We don't see self-love as something as being driven by ego, whilst that can happen and does happen. It's not the ego that is driving through that affection for the self. And I think it's also important to note the difference between self-love, what we mean by self-love, and being in love with oneself. Is there a difference? Well, you could argue that there is, because being in love with oneself, the thing that is the catalyst is the ego. And so if you are expressing self-love through the form of ego, that's slightly different. That's not the same as showing and feeling love for the self or self-love. I know, it can sound very confusing, using similar terminology. But essentially, the love that you feel for the self is more about in keeping with a more healthier, helpful, productive, positive state of existence, which is similar to when we meditate. It's similar to when we do energy work. It's similar to when, if we do yoga or Pilates or some kind of self practice in that way. It's no different. I'm just going to catch up with a couple of comments that Jay's made there. Love isn't limited to the one day or the shiny things to be bought, but it's in everyday ways we show love. Yes, absolutely, that you're quite right. Having said that, I tell my children every day that I love them, but also make an extra effort to show them, let me just hit the show more, to show them even more on Valentine's Day. Little things like making pancakes, because that's what you've done today, right? Giving them sweets and spending more time with them. Absolutely. Well, look, that leads us on to another subject. And actually, before we move on, I did a little bit of research before we started, because for me, I've been quite fascinated. I'm a little bit fascinated about how things and why things start, and why certain trends happen, and why do we have these certain celebrations and things like that. So I was quite interested to learn a bit about Valentine's Day and the history, what has led to us celebrating Valentine's Day. Why do we place such importance on Valentine's Day? Is there something from the past that has potentially driven that? And there may be. If we look at the past, there may be some subtle clues. And actually, Valentine's Day is celebrated by a lot of Western countries. So America, so North America, Canada, Australia, and some European countries also celebrate Valentine's. And interestingly, even some of the Far Eastern countries, Korea, South Korea also celebrates Valentine's Day, although they don't call it Valentine's Day, which I thought was rather interesting. But there may be some clues when we look at history and some of the theories around the origins of Valentine's Day that might lead to us understanding a bit more about why Valentine's Day has become so important. And, as the case with most things when we look at things in the past, it's normally a religious connection that is the trigger that has driven a lot of these things forward. So, for instance, there was a Roman festival. Now, I'm going to try and pronounce this, and I don't know if I'm going to do this any justice whatsoever. Lupercalia is what it's known as, which was celebrated in mid-February. And it was about the celebration of the coming of spring. Obviously, we have the spring equinox in March. This was celebrating the end of the cold period of winter, the cold and dry and biting weather conditions that we have in winter, during winter. And it was the celebration of spring, or the coming of spring, And it was also at this time when, which included fertility rights to be established. And there was an interesting event that happened where men and women would be paired off by way of lottery. So it wasn't so much anything to do with love per se, or having the affection of another. It was more of a case of, well, this is the authority at the time, the rulership at the time, and holding a lottery, and the names would be drawn, and that would be your partner. That would be who you would marry, or who you would go on and live with. So I find that quite an interesting backstory. But then later on, or further into history, should I say more recently, I think I'm saying that right, not any further back in time, but more recently, at the end of the 5th century, it was Pope Gelasius I that in the end actually forbid the celebration of this particular event. He kind of put his hand up or put his fist down and said, no, this is not to be celebrated anymore because it's not in keeping with religious faith. And so he banned the celebration of that particular event. And it's been attributed, that particular act has been attributed to the birth of Valentine's Day. That the introduction of love and marriage and the binding, the unification of two individuals was the first significant involvement, if you like, when love had started to appear. And then it wasn't until the 14th century that eventually Valentine's Day became the day that we know now as a day of celebrating romance. And cards would be sent, will you be my Valentine, and so on. And it's the tradition that we still follow now, you know, sending a Valentine's card to your loved one, be my Valentine. It's just that nowadays that act of showing affection, showing romance is supported with chocolates and flowers and gifts and things like that. And the name itself, Valentine's Day, it could be said that, again, linking back to religion and linking back to Christianity, because there were several martyrs that were named Valentine, but there was one particular martyr around 270 CE, who was a priest. He was a priest, and at the time it was Emperor Claudius II Gothicus, who was the ruler at that time. The priest was thrown into prison for something, and he was held there. And whilst during his imprisonment, he befriended a jailer's daughter. And by some accounts, it's even said that he healed her of blindness. And their friendship, they kindled up a friendship, and it became quite strong. And according to legend, he was the first individual that sent and signed a letter from your Valentine to the jailer's daughter. So we can see how over time this process of showing and displaying affection and showing love for a loved one has evolved. It's gone from Roman times where love was pretty much non-existent and not a part of the process at all. It was very much by syndicate, and off you go and cohabitate with each other, regardless. To then that process, that celebration being banned and it being turned more into a celebration of unionship, to then later on a martyr, a priest who declared his love for a jailer's daughter by signing a letter from your Valentine. Why has it become so entrenched in culture, particularly in Western culture, that we display love, romance, affection for a loved one? And because we're talking about romance, we're also associating this to a loved one in the sense of our partner, our husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. That's typically now how Valentine's is celebrated in a romantic kind of sense in that way. But why has it become such an entrenched act that we display and show affection for loved ones just once a year? And I wonder whether commercialization has a significant part to play in that process, for sure. But also, I think that we've become just conditioned in some way, programmed to a certain way, or to a certain degree, about how we should express our feelings and our emotions, that it's perfectly acceptable to display love and affection for a loved one once per year, but to display that similar love and affection at any other time of the year is deemed as it's deemed as not unacceptable, but it's numbified. We become numb in the process of displaying affection and love for others. But if we bring this back to point and bring this back to the self, and bring this back to how we started this discussion about self-love, then really displaying love for the self should be considered a perfectly unnatural, that was the word I was looking for, natural, accepted process of living. But sadly, that's not the case yet. I don't feel. We're not there totally yet. Displaying self-love shouldn't be seen as an arrogant thing. How many times have we heard somebody say, "Oh, you just love yourself," just because they seem to be displaying a certain quality or a certain confidence, a certain level of heightened confidence for themselves, or a certain act that they're performing, but they're deemed as loving for themselves, but that's seen as a bad thing. And I think that's also got something to do with why we celebrate Valentine's Day, why we celebrate the act of showing and displaying love for others, why that's become such a compressed thing, you know. You've practiced a lot of self-love today. Good. That's good. You know, we should be practicing self-love every day. Because really, when we master self-love, there's a lot of benefits that can come out of that. Love begins with the self. Love begins with you as the self, with you as the individual. And out of that self-love, there's many emotions and strengths that can be benefited from that. Respect and tolerance that can lead to respecting the body, respecting the mind, respecting one's emotions. And in showing the self-respect, then showing and displaying respect for others should become natural and easy, effortless even. In fact, all of the benefits that come from showing self-love have a profound impact on the effect that we have with other people. This is not anything new. This isn't shocking news, work on the self, which then ripples out to have benefits with others. Compassion and having a deep understanding of the self and knowing exactly what one needs and wants and at the right time. You know, Jay, you just said there that you spent some extra time in bed today. That's you giving yourself some compassion. That's you giving yourself the time, the space that you've needed in order to get that self-love. Is it self-love or self-care? What's the difference? It's a very interesting question. I think the question really should be what comes first. And I think that the what should come first is the love. We've established that the driving force, the power that drives manifestation, the power that drives evolution, the power that we reconnect to when we meditate, that feeling when we come out of meditating and we have this it's a woozy feeling, it's this giddy feeling that we have. That's compassion that we're feeling. That's compassion. And that is a form of love. That's a form of self-love. And from that can then come self-care. Because we can then start to care more for ourselves. When we love ourselves, we want to maintain ourselves. It's like a car. It's like having anything, let's put this in materialistic form. Having a car or having a house, you would maintain it. You want to maintain it. But before that act of care, there's something else that drives it. There's a desire. There's an emotional attachment that leads to that drive, excuse the pun, that leads us to wanting to maintain that car, wanting to maintain whatever that thing is that needs maintaining. A relationship is the same. A relationship needs maintaining. It needs love. It needs care. It needs devotion. It needs integrity, loyalty. You know, these are all components that really come after love. And that love starts and ends with the love for the self. If you don't maintain yourself, and if you don't look after yourself and take that self-care, then it's not that one is not loving the self or that love is non-existent. It's just that, well, let's go back to the analogy that we started with. Stress. It's obstacles. It's external factors. It's other things that's applying a certain pressure onto the self that becomes a distraction. We feel we have no time for self-care because of work pressure, or because we're running around here, there and everywhere. School runs, getting to and from work, the shopping needs doing, you know, everyday life things happen. And it's very easy to push aside the importance of looking after the self and maintaining the self. It's very easy to do that. But it doesn't mean that there is no love for the self, because that's always there. The love for the self is always there. it's a form of conditional love. Looking after the self, caring for the self, and you mentioned a moment ago, Jay, about spending some extra time with the kiddies today and showering them with your love, your affection. You know, that's a form of unconditional love. And that's possibly the most powerfulest form of love that exists. Now, there's some connotations about conditional love, unconditional love. There are those that would prefer to have conditional love. That's love with conditions and limitations in place. But really, as we've already said, love is boundless. Love is endless. And love doesn't come with conditions. There's no ifs or buts. You know, love is pure. That is it. It doesn't come with certain expectations. And when you have a love, an unconditional feeling of love, like a mother has for her children, that is the purest, strongest form of love. Strongest form of love. But that same love, that same unconditional love, is also what we can and have the potential of feeling for ourselves. It's the same love. Because there's no limitations. There's no expectancy. So I'm not sure all people would say that they have self-love, actually. Even if they do, they may not realise it. Well, this is very true. This is very true. And I think this goes back to what I was saying a moment ago, that to display self-love or a love for the self has almost become it's not an accepted thing. It's not seen in a positive light. Not always. It's always I'm using the word always, and that's not right. It more often is seen as an arrogance, as a form of arrogance, or that it's ego. That's different. When one is doing something out of ego, behaving a certain way, certain attributes or whatever, that's driven through egotistical means, that's not the same as doing something for love or doing something from a place of love. Those are two very different things. The ego and love so ego still has a place with love. It still has a place. But when something is being done or performed in a particular way where it is driven through ego or by ego, it's not the same as coming from a place of love. And I think that so people have conditional love for themselves as opposed to unconditional love. Right, I see what your point is. I see what you're trying to say. They have conditional love for themselves, possibly for a reason. But if you can't have unconditional love for yourself, can you give unconditional love to others? Well, that's the point. That's exactly the point. I think having conditional love or expecting conditional love is probably a result of an experience, a conditioning of some sort. it's probably the result and the manifestation of a trauma of some kind. To set the limitation, to protect oneself from being hurt or from getting hurt. I think that's what is what's happening there. When an individual sets conditions, it's restricting, it's suffocating, it's limiting. You know, it's not free, it's not open, flowing, transparent. And we know that love isn't like that. You're trying to control something that is uncontrollable. You're trying to put it in a box and it doesn't fit in a box. As far as love is concerned, the box doesn't exist. You know, it's not bound by time and space. It's not bound by conditions. It's not bound by, you know, you only have to look outside your window every single morning and look at the sunrise, and right there, that's love. Regardless of the scene, you look up in the sky and you can see the sun rising and the pink salmon skyline, you know, if you're fortunate enough to see that. And you see that at the right time in the morning, and you see the colours change as the sun rises, and the same in the evening when the sun sets and you see the same colouring, and then the dimming of the light, and then the stars appear. What you're witnessing is love in motion. What you're witnessing is something beautiful. What you're witnessing is something that is unconditional, because it's permanent, it's reliable, it's dependable, and it holds no boundaries. The sun will rise the next day and will set the next day. The stars will still be there. That's unconditional. Yes, love is like breathing. To a certain degree. Love is like breathing. It's expansive. In fact, because love is endless and boundless, there's no expansion, because it already is. Full stop. So, unconditional love for the self. It's important. It's important to... It's there without thinking about it. Yes, the act of breathing the air is a process that we give no thought to. It's something that happens naturally, organically. You know, we don't need to spend every second of every day worrying about it or thinking about it. Oh my gosh, I didn't breathe at that particular time of the day. Well, if that didn't happen, then you wouldn't be alive. Yes, in that regard, it's dependable. You can depend on it. You can rely on it. And it's a constant until a certain point. Love would continue, you know, that regardless of that last breath. You know, remember, love doesn't have a start and an end, unlike the breath does, and unlike, to a certain degree, time does, depending on how you view it. But love doesn't have those same boundaries. Yeah. So we've had some people pop in and out, so I can see we've got another viewer there. Don't be shy. Feel free to say hi and drop a like. But I hope you found the discussion interesting and thought-provoking. It's a subject that before going into the live today, it was a subject that I was not quite sure how I was going to address it. So I did a bit of research and thought about it, and I thought, yes, this is actually a subject that I really would love to talk about. And it is so important. I think that it is so relevant to what is going on in the world and what's happening with us all. Yes, I do have some cards. I have opened up our new set of chakra cards. And if you've been paying close attention, those watching on replay, to our social media posts recently, you may spot the cards being used in some way. So this is a chakra deck, as I say. So what I'm going to do is just a quick draw, single card draw. And we'll see what comes out. It'd be interesting, it'd be fascinating if love comes out, right? It's not the turtle. It's not the spirit card deck. So I can't wish for the turtle in this instance. AJ. We'll have to share the story of this. Obviously, turtles are my spirit. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's not my spirit animal. My spirit animal is something different. But it's an animal that I am closely I hold high affection for. Let's put it that way. Cards being very stubborn. It's a new deck, so I think that was the one. Let's see what we got here. Interesting. Okay, so the card that has come out is actually the solar plexus. That's what I was trying to say, an affinity with turtles. I was trying to say the word, but I couldn't think of it. So it is the solar plexus chakra. Now, the solar plexus, it's interesting that it is this card and not the heart, because I find this quite fascinating. Yeah, I want to ask you, Jay, first of all, if you wouldn't mind just popping in the comments there why you're interested by it being the solar plexus, because I've got my thoughts. It does keep coming up, doesn't it? It does keep coming up. Wasn't it at the live that we did at the weekend when we had Laurie on call there with us? It was coming up then as well, if I remember rightly, and it's come up a few times for us. Come on, Jay, I'm going to do a pull for you now. So center yourself, close your eyes for a moment. Just ground yourself, focus inwards. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's an interesting one. Very interesting. Oh, two cards came out. That was sneaky. Another card came out behind it. So you had two. So the first one, well, they're both crown chakra. This is your first one, if you can see that. Insight. Insight. So understanding, awakening, awareness, and self-evaluation. And the second card is also a crown chakra card. And this, interestingly, is intuition. So, what do you make of that? 41 and 42. I did shuffle the cards earlier when I got them out of the deck. I did a good shuffle with them. So it's interesting that these two have come out together. Maybe we'll have a discussion later about what you think, what your interpretation is of that. Might just do one for myself, just for the fun of it. Send to yourself, Adrian. Let's see what comes out for me. 3 separate pools and numbers were together. Oh yes, we did, didn't we? Yes, we did. Oh, I think that was one. I do find that the newer cards probably need to break them in a bit more, because I do find that they tend to clump together a little bit. Maybe it's just how I'm using it. Laurie's way better at shuffling these cards than I am. We need Laurie's hands to shuffle them. Oh, I nearly had a whole load fall out then, haven't we? Been quite stubborn as a result. I might do this another way. I might fan them. Let's do it that way. I'll fan it on the floor and then pick a number, pick a card, I mean. Let's have a look. Here we go. What do we got? Oh, I do believe this is a crown as well. So that is my card. Divine consciousness. Interconnection, expansion, oneness, and light. Fascinating. We've both had crown cards. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Divine consciousness, yes. And we've been talking a little bit this evening about consciousness, synergy. Yeah, absolutely. There is, well, there's synchronicities between us anyway, isn't there? It's, yeah, we know that for sure. We love it when synchronicities happen. So I think I'm going to end off there. I've spoken quite a bit this evening. It feels very much like it's been a not a lecture, but I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it this evening. It's been a fascinating subject, and I've really enjoyed talking about it. And the time really whizzes by. I talk about this a lot with my apprentices when I do my EPAs, that time, we fall into this very weird paradigm when we get involved in something, that we lose all sense of time and space, and our perception of time just completely changes. And I really love it when that happens, because it's a similar experience when we meditate. We lose all perception of time. There's no bounds at all. And I love the experience. I love the feeling of that. So it's been similar. I've really enjoyed talking about this subject this evening, and I hope that you enjoy watching on a replay. Thank you, darling, for keeping me company this evening. Otherwise it really would be just myself talking to myself. Yeah, look after yourselves. Love yourselves, that it's perfectly okay to love yourselves. And we'll see you again very soon. Don't forget to catch up with us this Sunday, when Joe and I will be back together for Synergy and Flow for our check-ins. So we look forward to seeing you there. Namaste, love and light.